Hello, I'm Mrs. B, and this is an extension of Manners in a Minute with a special guest, Miss Rebecca Zook, a magical mathematician.
Hello,
Thank
everybody.
you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Mrs. B.
Well, Miss Rebecca and I had to shift gears. We had originally planned to have a magical math tea party at the tea room, but with the coronavirus, we have shifted and pivoted to online events. So we are bringing the magical math tea party here to your table. So set a tea table and join us. Miss Rebecca, I am so intrigued by what you do, and when you approached me about having a math tea party, I knew this was the perfect pairing because you have done something for math that we have done for manners at the tea room. We try to instill fun, engaging, memorable moments for children and adults and make something that is normally kind of a rough subject more fun and intriguing. So we're not only learning about math today, we're also learning about some special tricks to make it magical. This is very different. So Miss Rebecca, will you please tell us how you became a magical math mentor?
Absolutely. So when I was growing up, I would actually cry a lot about math because I was working really hard, but I felt really confused. And then when I grew up, my first job out of college was actually teaching this test called the SAT, which everyone takes to get into college. And there's a lot of math on it. So I had to relearn all this math. And then I found I was having fun and my students were loving it, but I still thought I wasn't a math person. And then I started advertising for my own tutoring students, and I thought I would be a writing tutor because I love speaking and words and writing. But guess what happened?
It doesn't go as planned.
It did not go as planned. So almost everyone who contacted me wanted help with math. And almost all of them were creative, passionate, unique kids just like me. So because I had a hard time and I had to find different ways of explaining it to myself, I could really relate to my students who were having a hard time and needed different ways. Hey, Simon sneaking in the back, who needed different ways of
joining us later for tea.
He's our other special guest for today. Yes, so and there's one, and I've actually been doing this online since 2009, long before everyone else needed to take everything in the world virtual. So there's one student who really stands out to me, and I call her Purple Tutu. Can you guess why I call her Purple Tutu?
Is it because she wears a purple tutu on her head?
Not on her head.
On her hip?
Yes, exactly. So she would come to math tutoring wearing a purple tutu on her hips. And when we started working together, she would say things like, math doesn't like me anymore. And if she didn't know what to do, she would just break down and cry. So we started working together. So this is me. And this is Purple Tutu wearing a white tutu. We started working together and her math got stronger and stronger and stronger. And her grades got better and better and better and better and better until math wasn't scary anymore, until math became something she enjoyed more and more and more and more, until it actually felt magical because it was so clear and it made so much sense. So Purple Tutu is actually, can you guess what she's doing next week?
Is she
first week of June?
Summer. Is she becoming a math teacher herself?
She is graduating from a super competitive, intense high school where she got amazing grades in math the whole time through without being stressed out.
Oh, I love how you're approaching this because even though math is not going to be what Purple Tutu was going to study at school, she still had to be well-rounded and have an education and an understanding of math to make her future bright. And it's the same thing with manners. If you're very fancy and beautiful and elegant, but you don't have good manners, then it doesn't have a complete, you don't have a complete picture there. So you have to be well-rounded and know how to behave in certain situations and know how to answer certain problems. In math, those two are so similar.
Agreed. So one of the things Mrs. B and I want to share with you today is 3 essential tools to make math magical. So are you ready for tool number 1?
I am, yes, please.
Okay, so tool number 1 is to have a growth mindset. So what this means is we used to think that intelligence was fixed. It was like you had a certain amount when you were born and that was all you got. And people by extension would think, well, I'm either a math person and math is easy for me and I'm good at it, or I'm not a math person and math is hard for me and I'm bad at it. So if I have a problem with math, that means I'm not a math person. But amazing research about the brain and the true nature of the brain has taught us just recently that intelligence is something that you can grow with effort. So just like when you work a muscle, what happens to your muscle?
It grows and it connects to new areas in your body and you become so much stronger and brighter.
Right, right. So instead of your brain getting bigger when you work your brain gets more connected, and neurons, brain cells that used to not be connected, become connected, and then that is how we build our intelligence in our brain. So when you're working on math and it feels hard, just remember, it's not like you're good or you're bad. I used to have a hard time and look at me now. So if you're having a hard time, it doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. You just probably need something a little different. So a way to start practicing this with your parents is to ask yourself, what's the first step? And just being able to get started with that process of connecting.
I love that. And Miss Rebecca, may I interject that when learning to use a fork and a knife is much the same way. You don't start cutting a steak on your first time using a fork and a knife. First, you have to learn how to hold the fork and knife, and then how to cut it or to do salad, or there's so many different levels. So I love starting at step 1 and using questions like, what is the first step? Or another thing that I've learned from you is to use questions like, what questions do you have? Instead of, do you have any questions? I love it.
Yay! So that actually brings us to the secret of making math magical number 2. So exactly. So one of the ways that we can build our growth mindset is through using interactive incremental questions. So what that means is, instead of doing a problem where you're just trying to figure it out with no guidance at all, or you're doing a problem where someone's just explaining everything and you're not really participating, when I work with a student, I use little tiny questions to walk them through the steps of the problem. And the questions are so little that you are like 90% chance of being able to answer them right. So little tiny question, little tiny answer, little tiny question, little. So just walking through the steps of the problem, and then you learn how to go through the process. So number 1, you internalize those questions, you're able to walk yourself through a future problem independently. And when we walk through the little tiny questions and we hit a little tiny question where someone just doesn't know, then we say, oh, okay, that's where we need to slow down and practice more. And that way we can fill in the gaps in the foundation so you feel super solid and strong. So just like Mrs. B said, a great way to start to implement this at home is to use a little tiny question instead of saying, do you have any questions? Because most people will automatically say no. We say, Mrs. B, say it again.
What questions do you have?
Beautiful.
Thank
Okay.
you. Well, I learned that from you, Miss Rebecca, and I think that many of these lessons are applicable to other areas in our life as well.
Agree. So, ready for Secret of Making Math Magical number 3?
Yes, I am. Now, I have to remind everyone here that when you're approaching a subject like math, which can be so daunting, you have to remember to be present, unrushed, and undistracted. Non distracted? Well, you just sit down, maybe pour a nice cup of tea with some lovely little treats, and make it a sweet experience instead of something that you're dreading. So, ding, 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 number 3.
So, number 3 is if you are having a hard time and it doesn't feel good, you actually slow down and practice more until it feels good.
Slow down.
This is the biggest secret of all. Practice until it actually feels good.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't feel good because of something before, go back and practice that thing before until that feels good. So most people, when they're having a hard time with math, they just want to get it done. They just want to get it over with. They just want to turn it in and forget about it. And this is very normal human response to a stressful challenge. But we train ourselves as masters to flip it and slow down and do more. Just like if you were having a hard time playing basketball, you would practice. So an easy way to start implementing this is ask yourself, how does this feel on a scale of 1 to 10? If it feels like a negative 89, then probably do some more until it feels better. If it feels like a 9 or a 10, then you're ready to move on to the next idea. So another way of thinking about this is letting your mastery needs set the pace. So even if everyone else is going like bloop, 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 if you need to slow down, that's what really in the end actually makes things faster.
Now, I think that this lesson of letting children develop at their rate and finding what that rate is so wonderful, because just like good manners and math, you cannot give a child these skills. They must master them on their own. And the sooner they feel excited and happy to be able to do that and enjoy the process and make it their own, the sooner it is a success. So, Miss Rebecca, why don't we put some of these lessons to practice with some real math problems?
Yes, I'm so excited. Okay, Mrs. B, let's do a subtraction problem.
Oh, I love it.
Awesome. So I'm going to show it to you on my screen.
Wonderful.
Can you see the problem?
I can see 302 minus 176.
Beautiful. So when we're subtracting, we always start all the way on the right. So can we do 2 take away 6?
No.
No, so we have to go next door and borrow
Knock, knock.
or regroup from the 0. Knock, knock. But is there anything we can take away from 0?
No, 0 is already 0, so you can't take anything from that.
Yes, so we have to go over again to the 3. And then the 3 becomes a 2. The 1 moves over here. And then the 10 becomes a 9. And that 1 moves over here. So Mrs. B, what is 12 minus 6?
6.
And 9 minus 7?
2.
And 2 minus 1?
1.
Beautiful. What's the answer?
126.
Absolutely correct.
Yay!
So you might have noticed that what I was doing with Mrs. B is I was using the little tiny questions to walk her through the steps of the problem. So that way, Mrs. B was engaged and also building her neural connections while we practiced subtraction with regrouping / borrowing. So we want.
And it sure felt good to have you asking the questions instead of just telling me the answers.
Yep. let's actually look at doing some adding fractions.
I love fractions because once I figured out the
So
denominator has to be the same when working together with them.
exactly. So let's take a quick look at an example of what Mrs. B means. So if we're looking at 1/4 plus 2/4, Mrs. B, what part of the fraction is the denominator, the top or the bottom?
Down. I always
Yeah.
remember denominator because D is for down.
Right. So what's the denominator on the left?
4.
What's the denominator on the right?
4.
Are they the same?
Yes.
Yes. So because the denominators are the same, they can be combined. So if we were going to look at the fractions visually, this is what 1/4 looks like. This
Yes.
is what 2/4 looks like. You can see that the sections are the same size. So because they have the same denominator, they have the same size sections. So we can just slide them together.
3/4.
Exactamundo, Mrs. B.
Yay!
Beautiful. So just to connect some dots, what Mrs. B started doing was sharing her own insights and reflections on her own learning. So if you are practicing with your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or guardian, and you have an insight and you share it with them, that's a great way to reinforce and make math even more magical. And probably the grown-up who's working with you will be really interested to hear your idea also. So I think we're going to do one more math problem together, also about fractions. So let's say we have 1/2 plus 1/3.
Those two denominators are not the same.
Those two denominators are not the same. So
I know it would be, well, 1 plus 1 is 2, but 2 and 3, oh dear.
So we have to do something special to find a common denominator. And there's a really fun way to do it visually. So if we're doing it visually, this is our 1/2.
Yes.
It has two sections, one filled in. This is our 1/3.
Yes.
But can you see how the sections aren't the same size?
Yes.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 1/2 and put it, and now how many sections do we have?
Ooh, now there's 6.
And then we take a 1/3 and slide it onto the halves. And now how many sections do we have?
6.
Right, so because they're both 6, can you see how they're now the same
Yes,
size?
I can see they're both 6, and there's 2 6 and then 3 6.
Right, so that means if you move them together, it would be pink here and pink here, and how many little?
So that would be 5/6.
5/6 is right. So real quick, let's go back to the whiteboard and let me show you how to do the same thing using a tool called the rule of 4. Here's how to do it without the fraction overlays, just using multiplying. So Mrs. B, what is 2 times 3?
6.
And 2 times 1?
2.
And going the other direction, 3 times 2?
6.
And 3 times 1?
3.
And then we do 3 6 plus 2 6. We add across the top. What's 3 plus 2?
5.
And we leave the bottom the same. So it's 5/6.
Yes.
So that's how to do it with, it's called the rule of 4, because you go bloop, 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 and you multiply 4 times. That also comes from the Math-U-See curriculum.
So it's important to know your multiplication tables for a problem like that.
Exactly. So that goes back to the principle of practicing until it feels good. So because Mrs. B was confident with her multiplying, then we could move on and be fluent with a new idea and just really enjoy the new idea.
Miss Rebecca, I have enjoyed this so much, and it's really nice as an adult, even at my age, to brush up on some of these little math lessons. So thank you very much.
You're so welcome. So I know that when I give this experience live, a lot of parents are curious to talk to me about how their child could work one-on-one with me, the way that Mrs. B just worked one-on-one with me. So if you're watching this video and you want to talk to me, I am inviting you to have a quick phone call with me about working one-on-one with your child. So on this call, we'll just talk about what's not working with math, what you want instead, and specific ways I can help. And if it makes sense, we'll go ahead and set up our first session. If you want to have this call with me, just click on the link in the description, which is makingmathmagical.com/YouTube RSVP. Fill out the little questions, and then I'll know to reach out to you so we can talk. So, because Mrs. B, part of etiquette is practicing your RSVP. So I thought it would be fun to have an RSVP for our YouTube video.
I think that's wonderful. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for spending your time with us and getting a little bit of into our math tea party. This was great. And we are here to support you in any way that we can. Miss Rebecca, myself, and any of our team. So please reach out to us if we can help with private etiquette or math classes. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much, Mrs. B.
Goodbye.